Hi everybody, welcome to Missy's Imaginings. Before I start, if you hear some pounding in the background, my neighbors are building something. And so there's a lot of hammering going on outside, so I apologize for the thumping going on. But I thought we would take some time to start on a basic pattern demonstration for the Miro Doll 70 centimeter girl. I've done a basic pattern for her, but it was kind of the traditional kind that I usually do, and I want to develop some different pieces for a different type of dress that I want to make. And also I've had a few questions on how to wrap and make the basic pattern on a female doll. And I got to looking, and I've shown on the male doll, I think it was the David Tennant resin sole doll that I have, that we did that. And I got to looking and I thought, well, I don't think I've done a female except maybe the little tiny Miro doll. So anyway, I thought we would go ahead and get her wrapped and do that, because I want to do a couple different kinds of patterns that I'll use as basic pieces to draft other things. And then I can kind of show you how I do that on a female who has a little bit more curves to deal with. Also, an update on my project. I've been working on the peacock gown, and so it's making good progress. I have the top all beaded and the sleeves are done, and then one of the front panels is done. And I thought I'd give an update on the entire project, because when I started it, I had made this gown to go underneath the dress, but I just didn't like the combination of the colors. It just, I don't know, it kind of clashed to me. And then with the color of her skin, this didn't look good. But I came up with a plan, because I remembered I have this fabric, which hopefully in the light you'll be able to see it shimmer. It's a gold metallic, and it's kind of like a chevron, but it's got more of a curve to it, which I thought would be fantastic for a gown to go underneath this with the open front laying on that. And I thought, oh, I like that so much better than the blue, and it'll shimmer even underneath. There we go. You can kind of see, hopefully, or maybe I should lift it up. You can kind of see the shimmer even through the blue, and then with the beading, I thought that's so much better than the blue that I had originally picked out and done. And then I wasn't real happy with the fit, so I'm not sure what I did wrong on the fit. I would have to investigate that. So I thought, well, let's just start from scratch, because this, it can fit, but it ended up with way too much overlap on the back. So I'm not sure entirely how I did that, but the gown has more of a little bit of a train, because the peacock overlay will have a big train, and then the front looks like this. But I think just in the gold fabric, it'll work so much better to go with the peacock gown. So that's an update on that project, and then we'll go ahead and start wrapping up this doll. And I'll probably kind of speed up the camera just for the wrapping process, because it's pretty self-explanatory. So I'm going to wrap her in saran wrap and then wrap tape around it. And I'll have to grab my tape dispenser, but I like to get the tape that's I think they call it the magic tape or invisible tape. So it's the kind that's not shiny. And the reason I like that is because once she's wrapped and taped, that's easier to mark on than the shiny stuff, because a lot of times your pen or pencil won't mark on it, and if you try a Sharpie on it, often it doesn't dry quick enough and then it smears. So the frosted tape is what I like to use, because you can use a pencil or a Sharpie and it dries quickly, and then you can draw on your pattern lines much easier. So we'll go ahead and get her wrapped, and then take a look on how to draw on the pattern pieces that we want to make. So we'll switch up the camera and get started. So now that she's wrapped, I usually only do half the doll for my basic sets because, of course, once you get the patterns done, then they're mirrored for the other side. But because I'm going to do two different kinds of pattern sets, we'll do the traditional one first. So usually I find kind of where the navel roughly is and the waist, and I'm going to do the waist first. And so I usually just draw a line where I'm going to have the waist go around, and it doesn't have to be exact. And if you find that one side's crooked or something like that, you can always, go back and change it a little bit once to make sure you're happy with it. And this is a little bit of a lower waist. Then I'll do, see, the good thing about the frosted tape is I see a shiny part here. So that's just a good clue that I have a little spot of saran wrap that didn't get taped over. So that way you can make sure that everything is covered. There we go. And, oh, a little spot there. Okay. Then from the back, I'll draw the center back. Let's see here. There we go. And a neckline. And I usually like to get the neckline not really high, but fairly high. There we go. And usually I'll do a center front on the neck, and I usually will write front, and then a center back on the neckline. Put a B there for the back. And I usually will make a collar pretty high up, just in case, I want to do a turtleneck or something, so that I know my collars are plenty tall. Then a shoulder. And then I usually do the line where the shoulder of the torso is, but remember on a sleeve, especially a t-shirt sleeve, a lot of times it'll actually come out this far, so that's why you have to allot enough of a shoulder on the sleeves, or you extend the shoulder depending on what pattern you're wanting to make. So just to keep in mind that generally when I do that, I don't bring the shoulder out to the curve of the shoulder. I just do it to the actual torso of the resin, and then I keep that in mind when I'm drafting a pattern. And in the underarm, I tend to go a little bit lower. Then around the wrist, I like to make, let's see, does it show there? I like to make the wrist come down onto the top of the hand rather than the edge of the resin, just so that when I'm making long sleeves, I know they're going to be long enough. And then I'll do a line from the palm and under the arm that ends up being the side of the sleeve. Okay, now I'll turn so you can see there. Then from that, that center, and then I find where the side is, and I go up to where the sleeve underarm seam is. So that's, let's see, get her, there we go. Get her hand out of the way, like that. And then we're going to do, let's see here, a center front. Okay, so here comes into play a couple different ways that you can design the torso pattern part. So you can go from the very tip of the bust up to under the arm, and then under the bust and straight down, and create a side piece like so. And then your front piece will have a definite curve to it. So that's one way. And then on the back, you can do the same thing to account for that curve. And create a back piece. Now when you're cutting those out, you can choose a point and create a dart, or you can cut it into two pieces. The same way here, you don't want to make your dart right at the tip of the bust, but a little bit above the bust and a little bit below the bust, you can create a dart if you like when you spread that out, and then it will gather your pieces back together. Because when you take this all off and try to put it on flat paper, there's going to be a lot of bumps and curves. So those are just places where you can add a dart if you don't want to separate all those pieces. So the next type of bust I wanted to do as far as pattern pieces was to make like a bustier type, and I like to have a lot of coverage when I do those. So that's totally up to however you would like to make your pieces. So it's going to go pretty far up under the arm and over the bust, and then come across the back to here for straight across the back. I'll still do my side seam, let's see, like I did before. And then in the back, once again, you can make that into two pieces, or you can create a dart to fit. So there's two pieces for the back. Now for the front, it's kind of however you want the pieces to fit together. So I'm going to do a top piece that will come here and go straight across. Then it's going to have a piece here and here. So these are all separate pieces, and then once you cut them apart, remember you have to add a seam allowance. So this is the pieces that I'm going to have for like the strapless gown that I'm going to make. I'm going to have a lot of piecework because I want it to have a nice fit. So that's the pieces here. So this is going to be my center back. This is a side back. Then this, you could do a seam here, but it looks like it'd be pretty flat, so I'm just going to call this the front. This is the center front. This is the side front. This is the top. Sorry, I'll have to edit out all these pieces where she's too big to fit in the frame. Then on the pant part, or for leggings, again, I'm going to do the center seam. There we go. And then there will be a side seam for the leg. Oh, there we go. And And later this can be straightened with a ruler as well. So I get the outside. Then the ankle, again, I tend to take it a little bit lower onto the foot for the leg length. Let's see if that'll show. So down there. And then, of course, we need an inseam on the center front on the upper part of the pant. Then the inseam. Let's see if we can maybe get this leg out of the way. Here we go. And remember when you do this, that these pieces are not yet ready for clothing, because these are, of course, directly from wrapping the doll. So if you tried to cut these out and sew them, you're just going to get, you know, something that's as big as this tape. So it's going to be hard to get on. It's not going to want to fit very well. So when you transfer this onto paper, then you want to give a little bit, like a 16th of an inch all the way around, just to allot for the thickness of fabric and trying to get things on. Then you can design whatever kind of shoe wear you want by making a pattern from the foot. And so if you do like a center line on the foot, of course you know that one side's going to be different than the other because the foot is shaped differently. And then you can also kind of do wherever you would want like a slipper opening, just as a guide. Also like on the heel, the center back of the heel. Then I'll trace around the sole of the foot. I do like to make shoes, so here's a little pair of shoes that I don't know how the lighting is. It's a little pair of wingtip shoes, gray and black. So sometimes you might be inspired to make some shoes. So then that gives me the foot, and then all the pieces that I would want to create different pieces of clothing. So I will next, once I have this all done, in combination with a nice sharper pair of scissors, I carefully use my little blade and scissors to carefully get the cuts made on these seam lines where I'm going to take the pieces off the doll. When I'm taking the pieces off, I like to find scissors that have a fairly small tip so I can kind of get in there and cut these off. And I want to be careful to stay close to these lines and not ruin my seam lines. So I can also use this, and you just want to be careful so you don't scratch your doll. There we go. So that's it. Then we just cut these off, and then we'll take a look on how to go ahead and transfer them to paper. something a little bit new. I got the roll of tissue paper that I talked about in an earlier video, and I have these new stands for hanging clothing at my doll shows. So I just went ahead and tied some old strings and then put the dowel through it. Well, I used a couple because these rolls are a little bit heavy, and then threaded the paper down through the bottom so I can pull it out as I need it, and have easy access to the paper and still keep the roll out of the way. So I don't know, I'm going to try it, see how I like it. But now that we have our pieces all cut out, all we have to do is to transfer them to the paper. So I thought, well, I'll try this and we'll see how it works. I like this paper because it's wide enough to do these very long legs. And then of course it'll be big enough for the other pieces. So our next step is to go ahead and to transfer what we've taken from the doll onto our pattern paper. And that's how I go about making the pieces. So these are the pieces that would be for the bustier style top that you could use for a top, or you could use it for the bodice of a dress. Then I do have a video on sewing a bustier top for the Hua Rong doll that I have, who's over here in the kimono. And so this is how I would go about putting those pieces together. So on the patterns that I've traced on here, I would just go about, I usually like to use a thinner Sharpie for the actual seam line, and then a darker, wider, not darker, but wider Sharpie for the cut line. The only thing to keep in mind is if you want to design something that's going to be on the fold, for instance, on a center front fold, if you were to place this on a fold, then you would not need the seam allowance. And so as you're drafting your patterns, just keep that in mind. I like to just put the seam allowance on my basic sets because it's a reminder so that I don't forget to add that seam allowance. If you only trace this much, a lot of times you forget, oh yeah, I need seam allowance all the way around, because if you sew this, then you're going to end up sewing for a very small doll. So you take an SD and shrink it down to an MSD because you didn't give a seam allowance. So just that's what I like to do in my process, is go around them with the smaller one and then add the seam allowance. So that's what I would do to the rest of the pieces that I've already put on the tissue paper. And then I still need to trace on my little shoe pattern roughly, and there is the curvature of the toe, so a lot of times what I'll do for that, and that's why I didn't just do it here, is I like to snip, just put little snips in that part that curves down around the toe, and that way when I flatten it out, I'll be able to see where those little etchings are, so that I can go all the way around that piece and then just add those little etchings, or it just gives me enough of my material or textile, and then I can just take a basting stitch around that toe and gather it back down underneath for the shoe. But I still also put a seam allowance on there. So anyway, I will go ahead and get those finished up. But there is a basic pattern set on the website already for this doll. It just does not have the shoe or these pieces. So I'll try to get these ready and sometime in the near future add this section for the bustier top to the website, so you'll have those pieces for that Miro doll 70 centimeter female. But that's how I do it, and that's how I wrap the doll, get everything drawn on, cut it all off, and put it onto paper, so that now I have something I can use to draft my designs. Before I leave, I thought I would come back and show something on the legs. When you look at the original line, you'll see it's really wavy because those pieces were really wavy because of the form of the doll. So when I do the very first thin line, I draw from where the ankle would be to where the crotch seam comes down to the inseam, and make that a straight line, just so that I have straight legs on my fabric. On the outside, there's a big pleat here because of the curvature of the doll, and that's just simply where I cut down on the pattern, as you saw, and then just left the pleat in here, so when I draft I can account for that. So when I draw from the edge of this point, I can't get to the ankle because of the width of the calf, so I match it up from this point to make sure I've included the calf, and then just come straight down and extend that ankle measurement out a little bit, so that that gives me a straight leg on the pant. Then I do the same thing for the front. I come from where the crotch seam meets the inseam, and I come straight down to the ankle, making sure that all the curves of the leg are inside the line. The same thing for the outside, but I don't extend the waist here. I just go from where the widest part of the hip comes down on the side, and then I come straight down to that ankle, making sure to include all the curves. So I just wanted to keep all these lines in place so that you could actually see them go from the cut pattern piece to where I would make my actual pattern straight lines, and then I added the seam allowance. So I just wanted to tack this on to the end, because as I got to working I thought, oh, I didn't show that. Also on the collar, since I only do half of the collar, I'll do one collar with the center front in the middle. For example, if I want to make a turtleneck, I would use this. Then I make another collar where I flip that piece so that the center back is in the middle for like a regular button-up shirt, so that the center back is fabric and then the collar wraps around to the front of the neck. So I usually do each kind of collar when I'm putting that together. I just wanted to make note of those couple things that I hadn't done yet when I drew the last pieces there. So there we go. There's the legs and the collars and the rest of the set, so you can see what it looks like. Ta-da! So I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you next time. Bye!